Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video of Fox Flicks on SCP Explained. Today we're looking at the SCP Foundation, but the roles are reversed. Most SCPs are now facility workers and facility workers are now SCPs, so let's hop into this.
Mobile Task Force operatives fire their assault rifles at the approaching crowd of SCP-008 zombies, only to be swarmed and overwhelmed. Administrative staff try to activate the communications arrays and contact help from another site, but SCP-106 has melted all the wiring already, keeping them cut off from the outside world. Abel is drawing his obsidian blades to slice and dice some unfortunate guards, and SCP-682 is running rampant in the halls, devouring everyone he sees. In Site-19, thanks to the biggest containment breach in modern record, the inmates are now running the asylum. The guards are no longer in control, the researchers have no information, and the administrative staff is powerless. This time, the anomalies are on top. How will our heroes at the SCP Foundation fare when the roles are reversed? First, we join Dr. Clef, the most trigger-happy researcher that the SCP Foundation ever employed. He never met an anomaly.
Trigger-happy? Huh, I guess he likes guns.
He didn't propose to terminate. Most of these anomalies, he'd be happy to tell to their faces he wanted to terminate them. This was a decision he may have wanted.
Except you can't really harm SCP-53, because the moment you try to, you are cut.
To go back on now that the roles were reversed, and he found himself strapped to a table with a number of belts. He struggled against his restraints, but it was no good. He was stuck tight. Standing above him was a D-Class possessed by SCP-035, the possessive mask, carrying one of Dr. Clef's favorite shotguns. A squad of cackling, vengeful members of D-Class personnel stood behind him, egging him on. The possessive mask laughed and spoke.
Dr. Alto Clef, I have conferred with my associates, the esteemed members of the SCP Foundation's D-Class personnel, and in light of your poor conduct, belligerent nature, and repeated acts of excessive aggression, we think continued containment would present undue risks. Instead, we recommend immediate termination!
Dr. Clef gulped, and the possessive mask cocked his shotgun. Elsewhere in the facility, SCP-076-1 Abel, the Immortal Warrior, was running some training simulations. The exact kind that Mobile Task Force operatives might run, but with a twist. This time, it was Abel's training, and he was using some captive Mobile Task Force officers as training equipment. He'd taken away their
That one guy can't even pick up the sword. What the hell is he gonna do?
Guns, and instead gave every single one of them one of his swords, which, it probably goes without saying, they weren't quite as adept with as he was. Not that Abel cared. When he was ready to begin his training simulation, he pulled out a blade in each hand and jumped down into the training area. The sword-wielding MTF operatives were shaking in their boots as he approached. The biggest, most psychopathic smile stretched across his face. The second that one of the MTF operatives made the terrible mistake of raising his sword and running in, Abel effortlessly parried him, and the slaughter began. By the time this training simulation was done, Abel was the only survivor, and none of the MTF operatives would later revive themselves in a giant black sarcophagus. Meanwhile, SCP-682 was working on a more personal project. One of the—
Okay, now here's a serious question. If SCP-682 was to now wear the necklace of Dr. Jack Blight, or Bright, I forget however his name is, would Jack take over or just be stuck to the lizard? Now that's a question.
The SCP Foundation's most enduring efforts was attempting to terminate SCP-682 at all costs, using some methods that even hardcore sadists would describe as exceptionally cruel, and the irreplaceable Dr. Jack Bright had contributed more than his fair share of potential killing methods, including using his anomalous medallion to forcibly insert his consciousness into SCP-682's own. But now that the roles were reversed, 682 wanted a little of that sweet, sweet payback. After devouring his fill of random researchers and guards, 682
Okay, so you already tried. Never mind.
decided to narrow his focus onto Dr. Bright. That's exactly why he had Dr. Bright hanging by his arms from a pair of chains above the same tank of acid that 682 had been wasting away in for decades now. 682 couldn't wait for Dr. Bright to experience the pain he'd known for so long. Well, Doctor, we've tried burning, crushing, and freezing, and still it seems we can't give you a permanent death. We'll try the acid now. I can tell you from personal
I always forget 682 can talk.
experience, Doctor. This acid is very, very effective. 682 pulled a lever on the ground, loosening the chains around Dr. Bright's arms. As the wisecracking researcher dropped down towards the acid, 682 felt a profound sense of calm. SCP-049, on the other hand, was feeling a profound sense of excitement. After all, he'd spent months being experimented on by low-level research staff, after having his own rights to research taken
Hold on, sorry. And we're back.
away after a minor incident involving the death and subsequent reanimation of senior researcher Hamlin. And now, with the tables turned and the roles reversed, everything was about to change. 049 had a whole gaggle of captured researchers confined in a cell, the perfect testing stock for his next series of experiments into the pestilence. The plague doctor opened his bag and began taking out each one of his frightening medical tools, laying them across a nearby table and ignoring the cries of protest from the cell. He feels no pity for them. They should be honored to become part of such a towering body of research. Their sacrifices would not be meaningless, as their deaths would contribute to saving so many other lives. The exact same logic that the SCP Foundation uses to justify every piece of collateral damage that they've ever incurred. But as the plague doctor walks towards the cell with a scalpel, wondering which of the terrified researchers he'd select first, none of them really appreciated the irony. Someone that did very much appreciate irony was SCP-106, one of the most cruel, calculating,
or as many people call him, Larry.
and sadistic anomalies that the Foundation has ever had to contain. While he wasn't nearly as talkative as some of the other sapient humanoid anomalies out there, he was still extremely intelligent, and he'd been observing methods that the SCP Foundation had been using to contain him for all these years. The one he found the most frustrating was their tendency to make the area around his containment cell extremely complicated, knowing it would confuse him and make it that much harder for him to escape. SCP-106 had been planning his particular method of role reversal for years, and little by little, building it in his beloved pocket dimension. As soon as the anomalies took control of Site-19, SCP-106...
So, he's been copying their structure? Oh boy, that ain't good.
captured a gaggle of researchers and guards and dragged them to his hellish pocket dimension. There, he trapped each one of them inside cells in a twisted version of Site-19. As each one tried to escape, they found that they were trapped in the same complex network of obstacles they'd always used to keep SCP-106 contained. The one difference is, in this case, they were being chased by SCP-106, and they weren't just playing for their freedom, they were playing for their lives. It was the most fun SCP-106 had had in years. But not all of the anomalies subject to the mass Site-19 role reversal were acting out violent revenge fantasies. The anomalous butler, Mr. Deeds, summoned up by the SCP-662 Bell, was enjoying a real change of peace under anomalous control. During the early hours of the containment breach, a researcher had rung the bell and summoned Mr. Deeds to help them control the chaos. But for some reason beyond anyone's understanding, Mr. Deeds had simply refused the orders. Not because they weren't possible, as is the case of his usual commands, but because today, he simply did not feel like it. And if the Foundation personnel who...
That's a first of all times. Mr. Deed has never before ever said he doesn't feel like doing it. That's a first.
Who summoned him didn't want him to alert more dangerous anomalies of their presence. They needed to wait on him for a change. It's not like they had any choice in the matter this time. That's why Mr. Deeds was reclining in the comfiest chair they could find, sipping on a pina colada and getting a foot massage from a nervous junior researcher. Even the anomaly, who devoted his entire life to service, was, on this special day, deciding to take a load off and treat himself to some much-needed rest and relaxation. And who could blame him, really? SCP-1370, on the other hand, was choosing to make war rather than love. Typically, this tiny, pathetic automaton known as Pesterbot was little more than an amusingly useless sentient toy with delusions of grandeur. He wasn't an anomaly that anyone took seriously, and even fewer people feared him. In short, SCP-1370 was perhaps the biggest loser in all the Foundation's containment. But now that the roles had been reversed, he wasn't so pathetic anymore. During the initial chaos of the containment breach, while all the security personnel was distracted by the significantly more dangerous anomalies, the Pesterbot somehow managed to sneak his way into the experimental weapons lab. That's where he got his hands on a 40-watt phased plasma rifle, which promptly fused to his little robot arm, allowing him to enact a spree of chaotic shootings across his section of the site. He cackled in his tinny robotic voice as guards and researchers fled from him. He leveled his plasma rifle and fired glowing hot blasts in all directions, while declaring himself to be the immutable mecha lord of all creation. And when he had such a deadly tool in his hands...
I believe Mechane would disagree with that, child.
And that with a single shot could superheat your skeleton into radioactive ash, nobody dared to dispute such a claim. Oh, how the tables had turned. But those weren't the only researchers in deep trouble. The grand role reversal had resulted in a lot of researchers with less than ethical scientific conduct getting a frightening taste of their own medicine. This is exactly what happened when a gang of the infamous Laughing Men, SCP
I'll be right back, folks. And we're back.
2419, the vengeful bodies of soulless D-Class personnel managed to get their hands on the dog-bodied senior researcher, Dr. Kane Pathos Crow.
Aw, man.
Dr. Crow had always been an aggressive user of SCP-158, also known as the Soul Extractor. Using this machine, he had ripped out the souls of many D-Classes as part of his frowned-upon Olympia project. Naturally, this role reversal would not result in Dr. Crow getting a favorable outcome. Instead, 3 Laughing Men forced him into the Soul Extractor, which promptly removed his soul and placed it into a jar. A jar which the Laughing Men then decided to play a round of catch with. And honestly, as adorable as he may be, I don't think there's any denying that Dr. Crow had this one coming. Maybe don't extract so many people's souls next time, Doctor. But for some anomalies, the role reversal was not a time for relaxation, rampaging, or revenge. It was a time for personal development. This was the case for SCP-2430, the immortal Hitler clone. With all the chaos that was going on, the daily staff Hitler-punching roster had fallen by the wayside, allowing the anomalous ex-dictator to leave his cell for once and wander around the facility. Eventually, he found himself in a room he'd never been in before, the Psych-19 Employee Library, which featured a wide range of both anomalous and non-anomalous texts. This was where he found and decided, out of sheer curiosity, to read a variety of personal development and anti-racism books that taught him the error of his ways. For the first time, and in what was perhaps the biggest role reversal of the entire breach, he began...
There's no way that would actually work.
...to realize that the philosophy of discrimination he'd held in his previous life had hurt millions of people and put him on the road to nowhere. But before he could go any further down the road of self-development, the long-awaited cavalry arrived. The fact that Psych-19 had dropped out of contact with other nearby sites for over 10 hours had raised alarm bells with the O5 Council, who dispatched a wide array of mobile task forces to save the terrorized populace of Psych-19 and return Foundation control. All of the day's role reversals were re-reversed back into their original state. That's right.
So it turns out this wasn't even what I thought it was. It was just an outbreak, and people got revenge.
Everything had been returned to normal. For now, anyway. Now go check out Rick and Morty, more powerful than the SCP Foundation, Mad Science...
That's where we're going to end up today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. Link will be in the description, and I'll see all you folks next time when we flick on. I almost forgot the outro for a second, though. Peace out.